Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content and $7 Productions. The wind off the North Atlantic is razor sharp, carrying the scent of salt and rotting kelp and the eerie sounds of nesting gannets. It is 1542, and Marguerite de la Rocque stands on the jagged shore of the Isle of Demons, a desolate rock off the coast of Newfoundland. She is a noblewoman of France, but here she is a ghost. Abandoned by her own cousin and left to die with nothing but her lover, a nurse, and a handful of supplies, Marguerite has watched the wilderness claim everyone else. Now, she is the only one left. The silence of the beach is broken by a low, guttural rumble. Out of the dark tree line, a polar bear emerges. A massive, shaggy wall of muscle and hunger that hasn't seen a human in weeks. It doesn't see a lady of the French court. It sees a meal. Marguerite doesn't scream. She doesn't pray for a rescue that isn't coming. Instead, she reaches for her harquebus, a primitive, heavy firearm that weighs nearly as much as she does. Her fingers are numb with cold, but her movements are steady and calculated. 1, she pours the coarse black powder into the barrel. 2, she rams the lead ball home, the metal clinking against the iron rod. 3, she blows on the glowing match cord, the embers brightening in the gray twilight. The bear rears up on its hind legs, a terrifying tower of fur and claws, and lets out a roar that shakes the very cliffs. Marguerite settles the heavy stock against her shoulder, squints down the barrel, and waits. She waits until she can smell the beast's breath. She waits until she can see the light reflecting in its black, pitiless eyes. She squeezes the trigger. A deafening crack echoes across the North Atlantic, followed by a cloud of thick, acrid smoke. When the haze clears, the bear lies dead in the surf. And Marguerite de la Rocque is still standing. This is the Isle of Demons. But the most dangerous creature in this frozen hell is her. Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week, the show where we tell the badass history of badasses. I am joined today by a special guest. She is an award-winning author and novelist whose work has appeared in The New Yorker, The Wall Street Journal, and many other media outlets. Please welcome New York Times bestselling author Allegra Goodman. Allegra, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to us today.
Of course.
So last year, you released a book called, and you just told me the pronunciation of it, and I already messed it up. It's been Isola in my head the whole time, but it's
I know. I have a friend who knows Italian, so she explained to me it's Isola, but it's spelled Isola.
Yes. And if you thought that was bad, wait until you hear my pronunciation of the person it's about. My co-host, Dr. Pat Larish, just consistently nails the French accent on everything. She's a linguist. She's great at all.
We'll get her to say
many different languages. Yes, we'll get her to say it.
We'll call my protagonist the badass of the week.
Right. Yes. There you go. There you go. But I can't do the French R, and there are several in this woman's name. But it is about the life of Marguerite de la Rocque de Hoberval, and it's received several awards. I read it. I really enjoyed it. And you're coming on today to tell us the story. So what is it about Marguerite's story that kind of drew you to it and made you feel like this was something that you wanted to get involved with?
Yeah. So Marguerite was a young French noblewoman in the 16th century, so many hundreds of years ago. And it is known that she sailed to the New World in 1542. The same year that Jacques Cartier made his third and final voyage to what we now know as Canada. And first of all, it's wild that a ship of colonists tried to come to North America in 1542. This is almost 100 years before the Pilgrims, This is really, really, really early. It was like going to the moon in those days. So that in itself excited me. Then the fact that there was this aristocratic young woman on the ship, sort of like, how did she end up on the ship? And then I found out that she was marooned on an island in the Gulf of St. Lawrence by the commander of the ship. So then the question is why and how and what did she do on this island completely unprepared? It wasn't like she had survival skills, in the middle of this, the Gulf of St. Lawrence, which is like a little ocean in itself, in this subarctic climate. And yet it is known that she survived.
Right. This was a wild story, and this was a wild ride trying to get research and get caught up on the story for this episode because, I have said repeatedly on the show that like it's really difficult to trip me up with like a historical badass I haven't heard of before. But I always use that. I've used that more than a dozen times now in preface of saying, but I didn't know this story. So maybe I should just stop saying that. But I didn't know this story. And I remember seeing an email on it. And my producer's like, yeah, she's like a 16th century French noblewoman. She's like a teenager. I was like, okay, I need a little more information. And he's like, oh no, but she was like marooned on an island. She fought bears and stuff. I was like, cool, yes, let's do this. And so going in on the research for it was interesting. And I read your book and I really enjoyed it. I thought you did an excellent job with it. And yes, this is kind of a wild story. This is a French noblewoman in the 16th century who's, like you said, marooned alone on an island with like surviving the elements. This is, it goes from some kind of period drama to like survival horror very quickly.
Yeah.
And, it was supposed to be it was a death sentence for pirates to be marooned on islands like this.
Totally.
And she like Jack Sparrow's her way off it. So we're going to take a really quick break for a commercial here. And then when we come back, we are going to go through the story of Marguerite de la Hoque. We're going to get Pat to insert this here. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Badass of the Week. I am here with author Allegra Goodman. And Allegra, in order to understand the story of Marguerite de la Hoque, we first need to understand the world that she is leaving.
Right.
So she is in Renaissance France in the 1530s. And what does her life kind of look like while she's there?
Yeah, so she is a young woman of privilege. She lives in a chateau. She's surrounded by servants. I think she's the kind of person who never did anything by herself. She probably never even dressed herself. She has a devoted nurse who raises her and waits on her hand and foot named Damienne. And, she, let's just say, singularly unprepared for, for island life. Let alone going on a ship.
As unprepared as a human being can be in history.
Yes. Which, of course, was one of the reasons I was drawn to her as a novelist. It's like, who could resist,
Right. I mean, it's wild because it is a true story. And we know it's a true story because there's pictures drawn of her. There's pictures like, it was written by people who talked to her. Like, she survives.
There are two contemporary accounts of her ordeal. Yes. Yeah, she was relatively famous in her own lifetime as a survivor, because it was so crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we're talking Renaissance France, like kind of the Reformation time period, chateaus, silk gowns. She is a noblewoman. She's a landowner in Picardy and Normandy. And she's friends with like the nobility and the elite and all of this. Like you can almost hear the music, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And she's unusual for the time because she owns land, which I think is not super common for women in this time period.
Right. I think she's, I see her as an orphan. I think she has a kinsman named Roberval who is sort of named her guardian, and she is his ward. So he, unfortunately, she technically owns the land, but in those days, women were really chattel. And so, it was either your husband or your father or your male guardian who would control everything. And unfortunately,
Right.
her guardian's rather unscrupulous and is an adventurer and a traveler. And he decides to make use of her land for his own purposes and her money.
Yes. Yes. Jean-Francois Roberval.
Mm,
And he is, adventurer. When I think of adventurers, I picture like a Dungeons and Dragons quest or something. I picture it as being noble, but adventurer at this time period just means like he's a dude that spent a lot of money on things,
yeah.
on traveling
Not a
around.
compliment.
Yeah, it's not a compliment.
He's a nobleman. He's a nobleman, but he's not very noble-minded, let's just say.
Yes. Yes, exactly. He's a soldier and explorer. He is a personal friend of the King of France, which helps. He's perpetually broke, but he's always blowing his money on fancy clothes and food and, military expeditions to Italy. But he's drinking buddies with the king. They fought together. They hunt together. So even though this guy continually fails, he's failing upwards into friendship with the king.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And I mean, this kind of sets up something that I wanted to ask you about, because with Jean-Francois, he is maybe a cousin. Like you said, maybe she's an orphan. Maybe he's a cousin. He might be an uncle. He might be an appointed guardian. We're not quite sure the relation here. And this is going to touch on something that'll come up a bit throughout the story and must have been pretty integral to you writing your novel, which is we don't have very much from Marguerite that she actually wrote down. We have
we don't have anything she wrote
people.
down. Unfortunately, no diary, no letters, nothing like that.
No, nothing like that. Her story was recorded by Queen Marguerite of Navarre, who's the Queen of Navarre,
Right.
and by royal cosmographer André Thevet and a couple other people. Her story is very famous, as you said, and like a lot of people who wrote about it, and a lot of these people talked to her and told her or tried to tell her story in writing, but some of those accounts don't always match up.
That's right.
Perfectly.
Conflict with each other. Yes.
Right. And so on Badass of the Week, our official stance is that if there are two plausible descriptions of a thing that can be historically certified, we just go with the more badass one. But what did you do how did you put this together for your story?
Well, that's a good rule of thumb. I think as a novelist, I definitely tend toward the more badass version. I did pay very much attention to the places where the two contemporary accounts coincide. For example, both of them mention that she fights these white bears. So I thought, okay, that is a salient point. These must be polar bears.
You cannot write this story without her fighting polar bear. This is absolutely
I know.
integral
That was
story.
actually one of the big attractions for me. It is also true that these different versions of the story serve the purposes of their author, as many versions of history do. The queen was very interested in writing a story about a woman being faithful to her husband and following him and sharing his punishment. And, so she sort of made it into a parable about that. The priest, André Thevet, claimed that he interviewed Marguerite, actually, but he was very interested in the supernatural. And he was interested in that. He wrote that she heard voices on the island, of demons and that kind of thing. So he was very interested in that part. So I took that all with a grain of salt and, of course, made my own version.
Right. That's the interesting thing, right? Like, even if people are trying to be people are trying to be completely like objective when they're writing history, it's difficult to do that because it's all filtered through your own life experience.
Totally.
So you're going to put things the way that you think about them.
That's right.
And that's assuming you're trying to be objective and you're not actually trying to tell a story or trying to like make a point with your story, right?
Right.
So it always is interesting. History, it's
and
a
I guess,
question
it is
lot,
important to note that, of course, I was writing a novel and I'm not a historian. So, my allegiance was to the story.
Exactly. People will be like, well, what really happened? I'd be like, dude, it's not math, right? It's not 2 + 2.
Nobody will ever be able to, bring her back from the grave,
Sure. But even things that are happening in the world right now, we can't agree on, right?
That's right.
That's
right.
the weird thing about studying history. So yeah. And then that was one thing I was going to ask you about, because you haven't, this is kind of a departure. Historical fiction is a little bit of a departure for what you've worked on in the past. And it was just that this story was that compelling.
Yeah, it was that compelling. I tried not to write it. But at the end of the day, I couldn't stop myself. Basically, I was just like, I can't do this. It's too much research and it's too stressful to write about somebody who lived so many hundreds of years ago. But then I just thought she was so amazing. She was a badass, and it just really drew me to her. And I ended up doing, a lot of research about as much as I could about her and her world and just sort of imagining my way into her and couldn't resist.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So some of the versions I've seen have said, well, Jean-Francois is probably a relative of some sort.
Yes.
And the two of them are like co-owners of this huge estate with lots of land and money and all of this. And that's going just great. And he's bros with the king. And at some point, the king is like, hey, you should go be the lieutenant general of New France.
That's
which
right.
is what
The
people call
viceroy, in
Canada.
fact. So he would be the king of the entire region of Canada, which they didn't even know how big it was. So viceroy, second only to the king of France. But this would be his territory.
Great.
So he was like,
King of
awesome,
Canada.
And actually that is true. That is certainly true that exists, that document, that he's commissioned to go to New France.
Yes. So he's commissioned to go to New France. And, I feel like there's some part of Marguerite that must have been like, okay, great, you can go and be a fancy adventurer on another continent. But instead of kind of her waving him off at the dock, she goes with him.
Yes.
And that is such an interesting thing because, like you said, this is way before the Pilgrims. This is way before Jamestown. This is like St. Augustine time period. This is old, right? Very early on. We're looking at like the 1540s. Like the Atlantic was just crossed for the first time like 45 years ago, right?
Yes, exactly. So it was really like the edge of the earth. And of course, nobody can really know what she was thinking and feeling when she ended up on the ship. It's known that she ended up on the ship. So as a novelist, my job was to, delve into that. And my instinct was that she would be terrified.
For sure.
It's sort of like when people talk about, going to Mars and they say, I'll volunteer for Mars. But of course, the idea was you wouldn't be able to come back from Mars,
And that's possible here too, right? Because people are coming, but they're
exactly. Very likely. I mean, on an expedition like this, you don't come back. Even the Pilgrims knew that more ships were going to come after the Mayflower with supplies and that kind of thing. This was just one explorer. This is really, the SpaceX of the time.
Yes. Yeah. April 1542.
Yes.
It's 3 ships. They're going to sail across the Atlantic. They're going to settle in a region that is not well mapped. They're going to try to establish a colony using like hunting and foraging food that they've never seen before. It is, like you said, like traveling to an alien world.
Mm-hmm. With native people who they know hate them.
Right. Yeah. And also like people already live there and don't want them there.
Totally don't, for good reason, do not want them there and slay them whenever they see them.
Yes. And that is known at this time when she gets that there are Iroquois.
That word's known. And we also know that Cartier did not do a good job endearing himself to the inhabitants of New France.
Yes. Later French expeditions do a better job, but Cartier that was not his strong suit.
Disaster. Yeah.
did not do a good job with that. So, okay. So she's stepping onto the boat, 1542. She's bringing her fine clothes. She's bringing her nursemaid, her status.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think she agreed to this? Was it family pressure? Was it the spirit of adventure? Was it the idea that she would be like the queen of New France?
Well, my theory in my book is that she was forced to go on this boat, that she did not agree to it. She did not want to be there. She was terrified for her life. She wanted to be a conventional noblewoman and be well married and have her own chateau and live in comfort in France. And
things seem like they were going pretty great. I feel like if I had her life, I wouldn't want to go to Mars either.
No, it's my interpretation. And also, we should add, she was terrified of this kinsman of hers, the Guardian. She's afraid of him. He's not.
Yes, he's a bad man.
He's cruel. He plays psychological games. He's very unpredictable. He's obviously got a lot of determination and talent, but he's scary.
Yeah, he's a killer. He's killed people in war. He will become a pirate later on.
She's scared of the New World as well. So this is a recipe for disaster in her mind, but she has no choice. And she does embark.
But she does it. She gets on the boat. She sets sail. There's no GPS. There's no antibiotics. Maps literally have monsters drawn on them in the area that she's heading to.
Yeah.
And she sets sail. And it's a trap. Like, it's already a trap. The monsters are drawn on the map, but the monsters are already on the boat with her, as you suggested. Like, he's already got plans for her. So she gets on the boat and they traverse the Atlantic, which is badass by itself. Like people could probably be considered badass by just making this voyage at this
Totally.
point.
Yeah.
And she gets over to the New World, but things on the boat are not good for her.
Yeah. So she angers her guardian, Roberval. And, you know, in the Queen's account, the Queen has one account of this, the priest has another. I sort of went with the priest's version in this case, where that she had an affair with somebody on the boat who is a servant, a secretary of the guardian. And he gets angry enough that he decides to punish them both and maroons them on this island. And her loyal nurse comes with her. So actually, to the beginning of this marooning, there are three of them on the island: Marguerite and her nurse and her lover. And
yes,
that actually interested me. In a lot of castaway tales, and I should also add, I'm like obsessed with castaways, so I've always been interested in this. You know, a lot of them, like Robinson Crusoe, for example, they're shipwrecked and they're alone from the beginning. She's not alone from the beginning. She has two companions, and that's sort of crucial because, you know, badasses aren't always born. Sometimes they're made. So she has some learning to do.
Yes, exactly.
And so she's not entirely alone. And so the three of them try to, you know, forge an existence on the island.
Right. So she has this affair, and you know she chooses her own lover, which is just unforgivable in this time period. And it's, you know, Roberval loves to he takes the moral high ground here. Oh, it's a lewd behavior. It's an affront to God. But also I want that other half of I want your money and your estate. And if I can just ditch you somewhere that you're not coming back, I'll just be able to inherit all this money and I can use it to become an even better king of Canada.
Yes, exactly.
So he drops her off on not just any island. It's an island that is known at the time as the Island of Demons, the Isle of Demons.
Yes.
Great.
And it's extremely cold in the winter.
Yeah. It's Canada, right? It's Newfoundland or possibly Quebec, depending on which island. It's cold, man. It's north, and it's winter is coming, and it is cold. Her nursemaid, in some versions, asks to come with her, and is allowed to go. And then I read a version of it where the ship is sailing away, and her lover actually jumps off the boat and swims to shore so that he can be with her.
I know. I read all those versions too. The reason I did not use that was it seemed to me impossible. I think the water was too cold for somebody to swim. It just seemed implausible to me. It's like that kind of water. It's like they say, you're like, what do you have? Like a minute and a half before hypothermia sets in.
Right.
I just couldn't. I was like, no, that's not real. Also, remember that at this time, very few people knew how to swim from Europe. Like the sailors didn't know how to swim.
That's always an interesting thing, right? You read these like Moby Dick kind of stories where like the whale knocks over the ship and nobody can swim.
So that didn't seem real to me. So I didn't use that. So that was just like not going to happen.
Jumps in the water to be with his girlfriend, and all of a sudden he's like, "It's cold, Brista, throw a rope, get me out of here."
Nobody's jumping in the water. Nobody's jumping in the water and swimming. No. That's just not happening.
So it's the three of them, and they have, in some versions of this, she's pregnant when this happens. And they have a small amount of food, some knives, some tools, and a gun. And not a gun like we have today. They have a harquebus, which is like a matchlock, black powder, this is 1543. This is pre-American Revolution style. This is the old style where to light a match and put it in like the wheel lock.
Very dangerous, very slow, very, very heavy and slow. So if you miss your shot, then it takes you like 5 minutes to like regroup, reload everything without it exploding in your face. And
yes.
So not an easy weapon to use.
No. It's and not only is it complicated to use and takes a long time between each shot, but you have to keep it dry. You have to keep the powder dry or it won't fire. And you're on an island that's like less than a mile in surface area that's being sprayed by water, and it's raining and snowing.
Yeah.
And presumably you have a limited amount of powder that if you get any of it wet, it's ruined.
Right. And there's going to be no more after that.
Right. There's nothing coming. This is what you got. So the ship sails away, and there's three of these people on this island in the North Atlantic, stranded on the moon. And they're on the Island of Demons. which is called the Isle of Demons because there was like weird noises came from the island at night.
This is the priest account. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Best guess right now by historians is that they were like gannets or puffins, depending on the island.
Yes.
We don't know where this island is in real life. There's two guesses, a couple guesses, but
exactly.
I don't know. I guess we're an audio podcast, so I wonder if Ian, our editor, can find the sound of gannets. I don't know if you've listened to this, but like the sound of gannets, like in season.
Yeah.
It's just a wild sound.
Yeah. And they're very dramatic birds, when they dive from high up down in for fish and, so she's struck by these. And of course, she's never seen gannets before. All these species on the island are new to her and new to Europeans, really, She's like, is it a goose?
Exactly. Is it what is this thing? And it sounds like human souls in agony.
Yeah.
It sounds like demons if you heard that noise at night.
Right, that could be the origin of that, that noise, the demonic noise.
Mm-hmm. Human screaming sounds. And like you said, there's animals that live on this island that are not native to the chateaus of Paris.
That's right.
And the Parisian countryside. There's seals, which they don't have. There's these different types of bird species. There's different type of plants. You have to learn which one's edible and which ones aren't.
Right.
And they have bears in France, but they don't have polar bears in France. And polar bears are white, which is already scary because I've never seen a white bear before, and now I have. And they're way bigger than the brown and the black bears you see in the French countryside.
That's right. That's right.
This time.
Yeah. So in my version, what happens is when the ice freezes over, because it gets so cold, the bears come over from the mainland, and they come to the island. So she's safe from them in the summertime, but they come hunting over the ice in the winter. And I did research on how they hunt and that kind of thing. And I tried to look at all of this stuff sort of through her eyes, that it was also completely new to her, that it would be terrifying to see a bear that was completely white like that. Or to see an Arctic fox, which is incredibly beautiful, pure white. And she thinks it might be an angel, when the first time she sees an Arctic fox.
But just like mythological, right? Ghostly, just different, right? This is a thing that I recognize in a color. I've never seen it before in the wild. And
exactly. You and I, we all have in our century National Geographic, and we have nature documentaries, and we have zoos, and we are familiar with unusual animals, even children, learn these things, but they didn't have access to any of this stuff.
No. And that is really wild to think about. So, okay, you have the secretary who was going to be the secretary to the Viceroy of New France and is now on this island.
Yes.
You have the nursemaid, and you have the prom queen, basically. They're all stranded on this island, and they're surrounded by polar bears, and there's no food, and winter is coming. It's the windy, rainy.
Winter is rapidly coming. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And they have to find shelter, and they have to find a way to survive. And that isn't easy, is it?
No. So again, in one of the accounts, I think the priest account, he says, or maybe the queen also, that they built a little house. And it seemed clear to me from researching the island that they wouldn't be enough timber to build a house, and they wouldn't have tools to do it. And also a house wouldn't have kept them warm enough. So it seemed to me they would have had to have lived in a cave.
Yes.
So that's absolutely. That's the way I went with that.
I agree with you. Like, a home, but that home couldn't have been, they're not doing some Swiss Family Robinson stuff here. Because there's two, we don't know where the Isle of Demons is. That's how long ago this was and how weird the maps were at the time, is that we don't actually know where the Isle of Demons is, but there's a couple guesses, and neither of these places is really conducive to, making a log cabin,
right. No.
So they are scavenging timber and stones to reinforce their cave against the wind, against wildlife. They're hunting with this hargabus. They're living on whatever kind of meat they can find, salted meats. They're setting traps. They're scavenging berries, trying to figure out what they can eat and what they can't. And then winter comes, and this is going to be a hard winter for Marguerite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you said it ahead of time. And this is one of the things that really makes this such a powerful story, is that she's here with the only two people in the world that she loves. And in some cases, she's pregnant at the time as well. And soon, over the course of like just illness and being cold and exposure and dehydration, starvation, all of this stuff, by the end of the winter, she's the only one left.
Yeah.
The baby, if there was one, is miscarried. The husband dies and the nursemaid dies. And when spring 1543 comes along, she's all alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's really the heart of the story. When she's alone, she has to figure out how to keep living and whether she wants to keep going at that point. It's like a physical challenge for her. It's a spiritual challenge for her and an emotional challenge for her to be in solitude. And this is a person who has never lived alone before. She's been surrounded by people all her life. So that's a huge, and to me, that is sort of like that's where she becomes the badass.
Yes, exactly. You know, she's never cooked her own food before, and now she's got to.
Yeah, it's an experience that breaks her, but also sort of remakes her. And she finds her strength. And that was the most fun to write.
Yes, and that is the part that we're going to get to after this break here. When we come back, things are very grim right now for Marguerite de la Rocque, but she's going to find some inner badass, and she's going to do some crazy stuff when we come back. Be right back. All right, welcome back to Badass of the Week. I am here with Allegra Goodman, and Allegra, you really touched on this point before the break that Marguerite has now lost everybody that she cares about, right? Even the guy that she hated that marooned her on the island, he was still probably family. Now she's nobody.
Yeah.
And she's alone, and she's digging graves for her two best friends with her bare hands and burying them. And now she's got whatever tattered remains of her pretty dresses are left,
exactly,
and a gun. And just, you know, I feel like in 19th and 18th century literature, people have just walked into the ocean for worse reasons than this.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, that she actually thinks about giving up, you know?
Must have, right?
At one point, she walks across the frozen ice and she thinks, I'm just going to walk until I drop, you know? So there are moments where she thinks that. There are moments where she worries that she's going to lose her mind. Just not having anyone to talk to, like just having no companionship, no compassion, no help. But she finds out that she's a lot stronger than she thought she was, and that she knew more than she thought she did. And that's just an exciting transformation to write about.
Yes. And so what kind of was because you write this in the first person, which is, we kind of I feel like that's kind of intense to put yourself in that situation and have to write from that way. And, you know, what do you think it was that kept her from, instead of walking in the ocean, she reinforces her cave. She keeps her gun clean. She keeps the fire going.
Yeah.
She fights. And what do you think inspired that?
I think she goes through some different phases. Like, you know, there's a point when, you know, she goes through sort of different stages of loss with each of the people. And, you know, we're making it sound like it all happened at once, but it's sort of a process for her.
It's over the course of months, right?
Yeah. Ultimately, I think what she finds is that she has a strength inside. And what she finds is also that this experience sort of like tempers her soul, you know, that it strengthens her. And she develops a different relationship to the world and to the natural world. She develops a different perspective toward the animals who are the predators, you know, when she fights the bears. She comes to see herself differently. And, you know, all of that is, and she's transformed, and she starts not thinking about who she used to be and starts thinking about who she is here and now. And ultimately, I also think it's sort of for her, it's a religious transformation where she develops a relationship with God. And I was intentional about that as well because her whole education is a religious education. And it seemed to me that
Right.
her whole framework for understanding what's happening to her would be like a religious framework.
It had to be, right? I mean,
It had to be.
It's mentioned in both of the versions that we have. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
it was her faith that kind of maintained her throughout this. And I
That's
have no
right.
doubt that really did help her, because she is coming from an upbringing that is very religiously oriented. And, this is Jesus in the cave, right? Being literally tormented by demons, which is what she's going through.
If you grow up with that, you can't help but see it, see analogies to
Right.
it. That said, she's never felt herself to be a religious person. She's always kind of denied her faith and doubted. I think for Marguerite, she's sort of envied her nurse, her faith, and she's envied her Claire, her best friend's faith. And she's never thought that she herself was religious, and she felt that she was a doubting, kind of flawed person. And what happens to her on the island is that she sort of she comes to her own relationship with God and her own sense of purpose and forges it for herself. And being on the island helps her to do that. And in a way, even though it's so hard, it's also a gift for her. It sort of makes her, and she recognizes that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, yes, she would have been Catholic, obviously, but, at that level of society, there's a chance that she was kind of just going through the motions. You got to go to church on Sunday. You got to do this.
Lots of ritual.
Now here I am, like on the island of demons, being tormented.
Yeah. The ritual didn't really do it for her, but when she saw the fox and when she fought the bear, that was starting to seem real.
Exactly. Now that I'm on this haunted island by myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Andre Theve writes, he says, she told me herself that she had to endure the most frightful things, but that she took up her arquebus and with a courage more than feminine, she killed the great white bears that came to devour her. And I was like, all right, whatever you need to get through that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you gotta love that. I mean, how can I not write a novel about that?
Right. Faith and a big gun.
Yeah.
No way to replenish your ammunition. This is survival horror. You don't know how long you're going to be there. No help is coming. Unlikely anybody's going to land on the island of demons to see what's going on there.
Yeah. And also, that's the other thing I think is so interesting. Like, a lot of us can endure hardship if we know when the end point is. For her, there's no end. Like, she assumes that she'll never. She assumes that she will die there on that island. Her powder will run out and she will die. If she doesn't freeze to death first.
Exactly. But she doesn't.
No.
So in the summer of 1544, she's kept her fires going, and that fire is spotted by a group of Basque fishermen.
Mm-hmm.
And these are like whalers who are out there. And I guess that's something else that would have been weird, because you could see whales and stuff. They have like orcas and humpback whales out there. That'd be another weird thing to see if you didn't expect to, if you didn't know what a whale was. Like, what is that giant thing in the ocean?
Mm-hmm.
But these whalers come out and they see a plume of smoke from the cursed island, and they land and they find noblewoman Marguerite de la Hogue. She is there wearing like the skins of the animals she's killed, like holding a loaded firearm.
At that point, she's been there about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, Robinson Crusoe was on his island over 30 years, but his island was basically tropical. It's very different.
Right. He had coconuts. He didn't have to fight polar bears.
Yeah. It's very, very different.
Yes. So she was there for a couple of years, which is a long time to survive by herself in the wilderness.
Yeah.
When she left France, she was Marie Antoinette. And when they find her on this island, she's like Jim Bowie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she lives. And they bring her back to France, where she arrives in late 1544. She makes it back across the Atlantic. Not only does she get off that island, but she returns to France. And this kind of blows everybody's minds. Yes.
Yeah. Nobody can believe it. Can you imagine? It would be like a ghost coming back. When, as you said before, when you're marooned like that, that's it. That's death. Nobody.
You're done. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so strange, and that's a ship happened to find her and bring her back. It seems like a miracle.
And so she comes back, and when she's back, Roberval is already there, because he was going to be the king of Canada, right?
Yeah.
He was supposed to be the king of Canada. He lasted less time than she did on that island
Correct.
as king of Canada.
Yeah. Arguably, she's the only one who had a colony.
Right. Yes.
He never, with all his bravado and his equipment and his men and his weapons, he did not he got through one winter and that was it. He was ready to leave.
Yep. Everyone got scurvy. They got attacked by the Iroquois.
Yeah.
They left. They became pirates
Frostbite,
for a little
scurvy,
bit.
attacked by the Native Americans. Yes.
And so he was back. And then when he came back, he was like, don't worry, all this stuff's mine because, Marguerite tragically died. And then she came back.
Yeah.
And we don't have really records of like the court proceedings or whatever, but it seems clear to me that she got her half of the estate back and he didn't get his because by 1555, he's completely broke and all of his possessions are being repossessed by the king.
That's right.
That seems to me that
he was in trouble.
Goes back to being wealthy aristocrat French woman. So seems like she would have won that court battle.
Well, I don't know. I don't include a court battle in my book. But one thing I did use from the Queen's account of her ordeal. The Queen said she ended up by teaching young ladies, and so I used that in my version. But yeah, she came back, and it's so strange. And then I thought about sort of the way that she might tell her story and the way others might try to capitalize on her story, and even in her lifetime, to be a celebrity like that, to come back from the dead, come back from the new world, like an astronaut returning, to tell these tales. They were so miraculous to people, so strange,
left for dead
horrifying.
on the island.
Yeah.
And she came back and she was able to teach like the next generation that like, maybe teach them that they have the strength to survive as well.
Maybe, yeah.
And so, yeah, because the climax of your story is the fighting the bear, which is just great. I love that. I love that whole sequence. It's great. And I'm not gonna spoil it or anything.
Yeah, I feel like we've gone into so much detail already. Yes. But yeah.
But so as for Jean-Francois, he's kind of like broke and hated, and then he gets killed by an angry mob in the streets.
Yes.
In 1560. So
he comes to a bad end.
Yeah. I mean, he earned it. Okay, so what? I always like to end these stories with kind of like, what's the lesson here that aspiring badasses can learn?
Aspiring badasses, yeah, that's such a good one. Well, use what you have, which she does excellently. Make a decision about how and why you might want to keep going. I think that was an important question for her, especially the why. What do you live for, and what is it worth to you to struggle? And that maybe patience is rewarded.
Right. She does. She must have thought she was going to be there for 30 years and she's there for 2, which is still like an unreasonably long time for a person with no survival training. Wasn't like she could like pull out her phone or something. It wasn't like she even had any, she probably, like we said, she probably never cooked a meal in her life. No. Right. And on this island.
Let alone hunted for her own food. Oh my goodness.
Right. Like shooting seals and skinning them and like cooking them on a fire. That's intense. And you have to really want to live to do that. And so
I think another thing for aspiring badasses, I would say, one thing that happens to Marguerite, and I think this is the most precious gift that she gets on the island, is that when she does return and when she does survive, she sees the whole world differently from when she left. She's a new person and she sees things with new eyes and she notices things she never noticed before. It has taken her out of her sort of limited world, her sort of cloistered world, very privileged world. And, there's a moment when she returns and she sees servants carrying water and she sees men carrying firewood into this grand house where she lives, this castle. And she can say honestly that she knows what it's like to carry water and she knows what it's like to carry firewood. She can feel that in her own body and she sees them as people. And,
like undercover boss.
She reassesses everything when she returns. And so, and I think that is a great gift of survival if you can get through it, right?
Yes.
So you could say, what do they say? If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. You can also say, if it doesn't kill you, it can also make you wiser or more insightful.
I like that a lot. I really like that. So I think I mentioned it before, but you do write this in first person.
Mm-hmm.
Did you personally learn anything from Marguerite while you were working on this?
Well, I knew I wanted to write it in the first person because a lot of the great castaway tales are in the first person. Like Robinson Crusoe tells his own story.
It's great. It reads like a journey, right? It
Yeah,
reads like,
exactly.
Reads like a
That's
journal,
what then there's this immediacy.
which she didn't keep. And so you kind of wrote it for her, which is cool.
Yeah, this is what happened to me. So I wanted to, and I saw her as a female Robinson Crusoe. So I wanted to use that mode. And I had to sort of listen really hard inside my imagination to what she would sound like. And I worked really hard on her voice and thinking about how she would tell her story as a noblewoman, as somebody who was, of course, she was French. And, so obviously this whole book is translated from her thoughts into English. But
right, yes.
I had to think about sort of, how old fashioned would she sound? How modern would she sound? And I sort of settled on this sort of ever so slightly old fashioned way of talking, but still very accessible. Not quite idiomatic 21st century language, but not archaic either.
Right, which is tricky with some of the old ones, especially people who did write their journals. It's so ancient that's really hard to track. If you're reading it, it's like reading a foreign language. You read some of the stuff from the 1700s.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want that. Yeah. I wanted it to be like really easy to understand. And so I worked on that. And what did I learn? And, I would say that as I got in further and further into the book, it was as if she was telling the story to me and I was transcribing it. And that's the best feeling as a writer.
That's cool. That's very cool. So as for the Isle of Demons, there are two guesses. One is Queerpon Island in Newfoundland, which looks very nice. They have whale watching tours. There's a little lighthouse there now where you can go. It looks really nice. The TripAdvisor reviews were very good for the little inn there. And then there's Harrington Harbor in Quebec, which is another option. There's no geographic features named for Marguerite on Queerpon Island, but there is a Marguerite's Cave in Harrington Harbor.
Yeah.
The island is less than a square mile in area, population 200, which probably none of them are actually demons, most likely. So can you talk for a minute about the research that went into this project? Because it's something that I understand well.
Yeah.
that's a survival story of its own.
Also, I appreciate all the research you did. Sort of reverse engineering her story. Research. So I began by reading everything I could about her. And we've mentioned the two contemporary accounts, one by the Queen of Navarre and one by this priest. And then I read as much as I could about her world. And I read about the Queen of Navarre and the court and how people lived at that time, what they wore, what they did with their free time. I looked at a lot of artwork in addition to reading books. I looked at paintings of young ladies at the time and what they were doing in those paintings, which was often playing the virginal, which is this keyboard instrument that's like an ancestor of the piano.
Interesting.
And I looked at how they were dressed, and I noticed that some of them had pearls woven into their hair. And, I looked at the jewels in these paintings. These things gave me details that I could use in my work. In addition, I looked at, for women's voices from the period. Of course, as we've said, Marguerite left no diary or no letters, but I looked at, for example, I found a guidebook of how to be a good, proper young princess or young lady, young noblewoman at the time. And
I love that kind of stuff.
It was great. And it was sort of like, this book was written by a woman named Anne of France for her daughter, Suzanne. And it's called Lessons to My Daughter. And I think Suzanne really was a princess. And it was sort of like, be kind to your servants, but not overly familiar. Never take a step without,
that's the sort of thing
never say anything in company and never take any initiative to do anything. And certainly never speak to a man alone. That will be, the end of your reputation and your life. And I decided really early on in my research process that I would take a little selection from these lessons and put it in front of each section of my book. And that in each case, Marguerite would do the opposite of the advice, either by choice or by necessity.
That was great. That was great. But
I wanted to give a cultural framework to what was happening so that readers could see sort of what she was up against and how far she traveled, when she ended up in the island.
Right. She wasn't, she didn't start off as a frontiers person who had a crazy adventure in the frontier. This isn't, even the Revenant is like that, right? Where he was already badass when the thing starts.
That's right.
Like, how far away from this can you get before it's transformed into, I'm wearing a polar bear pelt with a loaded shotgun, you know?
How far do you travel? I think that's a lot of the drama here. And that's why I spent time establishing where she came from before she ends up on the ship. The reader knows exactly, you know, how shocking this would be for her by that time. You have to have kind of a starting point to show a baseline to show the reader where she goes. So I also listened to a lot of music from the period, which was like lute music. And her guardian is a musician, her lover is a musician. I also researched ships of the period. And so I wanted to understand, you know, what the ship was built like and how people would move in the ship and where they would sleep. And there's replica of the Golden Hind in London, moored there, which you can walk around on, which is from the period. Yes. So I walked around on that ship. You know, I just did everything I could to sort of like figure this out. And I researched the islands that you mentioned and the climate, which was even colder then than it is now, because it was this period called the Little Ice Age at that time.
Oh, that's right.
So it was really cold. And, you know, and also sort of, you know, what grew on that island. And that's where I discovered like the trees would have been stunted. They would have been battered by the wind. And, you know, they didn't have any large forests on this island or anything like that.
No.
What would grow there? What would the bears
to work it with, right?
Yeah.
You didn't have a big saw. You couldn't make a saw.
No. What would the bears be like? How would they hunt? What kind of seabirds were there? And I looked at those gannets, you know, and studied how they would migrate and how they would nest and how they might be hunted.
It's that effort that goes into it. It's like so important, right? I interviewed Rebecca Cantrell. She's an author, and she was talking about something. She's like, anytime I start because she does a lot of historical fiction, and she was like, anytime I start, the first thing I look up is how do you turn on a light at this time period, right? Yeah. Is it a button? Is it a switch? Do you have to like turn on is it a lamp? Do you light a match? Do you make a torch? Right? Like, yeah, that stuff matters, right? If somebody walks into a castle and flips a light switch to turn the light on, your story
you kind of fall out of
done.
It at that point. Yeah, you want it to sort of be plausible. I mean, it is fiction, you know, but it has to. The world has to be internally consistent. So, sure. And then I actually looked at YouTube videos of people loading an arc bus. Like you can find like guys like showing you how to, and you know, I saw the whole process and how you would shoot that musket. And you're right. I mean,
it's a 3-minute video and you're like, there must be a whole bunch of setup and talking before this. And it's like, no, it just takes you 3 minutes to load this thing.
Oh, exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Allegra Goodman, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to us about this. I really enjoyed the book and I definitely want people to check it out. Where can people find you and your work online?
Oh, yeah. I have a website. AllegraGoodman.com. And I have an Instagram, which is Allegra Goodman Writer. So yeah, you can find me there. I often post actually videos about the writing process and research and writing and that kind of thing. And I have a new book also coming out on February 10th.
I saw that.
Which is called,
What's it called?
It's Not About Us. It was a contemporary book. Actually, it's set in 2015. So now I call it a historical novel.
That's a period piece now, yeah.
Yeah, because so much has happened since 2015.
Yep. Okay, well, Allegra, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was great having you here, and we'll definitely keep an eye out for the new book. And thank you so much for talking about Marguerite, which is a character that I didn't know about before.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thanks to all of you out there for listening to this episode. We really appreciate you being here and listening to us. And just remember, the next time you feel like the world is against you, Marguerite was standing on a frozen beach with a harquebus looking for bears to fight. So you probably got this. Until then, stay badass. Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content and $7 Productions. Executive producers are Dwayne Johnson, Danny Garcia, Andrew Jacobs, Hiram Garcia, Brian Gewirtz, Frankie Chaparino, and of course, me, Ben Thompson. Writing is by me and my semi-regular but always awesome co-host, Dr. Patricia Larish. Story editing by Ian Jacobs. Our mixing, music, and sound design is done by the incomparable Jude Brewer. Production support by Jean McGale-Waite. Badass of the Week is based on my website, badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions or ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, follow, listen, tell your friends, and tell your enemies. And please leave us a review. If you want to support Badass of the Week, please check out our Patreon page. We'll be back next week with another one.